Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast, which helps entrepreneurs generate more impact, wealth, and success, attract others for all the right reasons, and become a smart connector, the architect of your amazing business and life. This podcast is sponsored by Virtual Non-Execs, the world's #1 peer-to-peer board advisor community, which connects thousands of investors, entrepreneurs, and advisors globally. Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. My name is Jane Bayler, and I have, of course, a fantastic guest for you today. It's Felicity Francis. Welcome, Felicity.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Felicity is founder of Talk Results, which is a business that she's run for the past 13 and a half years. And Talk Results is a telemarketing business that reaches out using the ever-effective medium of one-to-one communication via phone calls. So what we're going to talk about tonight is why telemarketing is as relevant as ever, how to use it in a non-pushy, non-spammy way, and why every ambitious business owner should consider telemarketing as a tool in their client getting kit. So it's great to have you here, Felicity.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, of course, we're going to talk about this telemarketing thing, which a lot of people hate cold calling, don't they? It's their pet hate, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that it's always a cold call. Then, yeah, definitely so. I think unfortunately, yeah, there's a lot of issues around stigmatization around what telemarketing is.
Yeah,
and there's also a lot of people who have only trained with what I would deem like a bad habit. You know, it's all the lack of respect, and they forget to actually let the other person speak. And it's one of the sort of main killers in telemarketing, because if you think you're being sold to, nobody's going to want to buy from you.
Well, that's it. Yes, because we all love to buy, but we hate being sold to, right?
Yeah, very much, very much.
Yeah, definitely. So I think telemarketing is not just double glazing people or just people calling you out of the blue. I mean, of course, we've all had those experiences where is completely unsolicited. It is not something that we ever wanted. And of course, that is the bad side of telemarketing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed. And yes, received those numerously myself. And I think it's an inspiration to do it correctly.
Yeah. Okay. So doing it correctly is what we're going to talk about tonight. So how do you do telemarketing correctly in a way that actually works? Well, so for starters.
So the first thing is don't go near a telephone. You have to do a lot of prep work. So I don't believe in script reading with telemarketing because we all know how we feel when we're being script read to. So I won't use certain words, but we all know how we feel towards it. So the whole concept around telemarketing is actually the prep that you put beforehand. And there's two really key elements of that. One is about actually understanding what it is that you're talking about. You have to have confidence and competence before you even go near a telephone. And also you have to review your data because everybody is not your client. And I think a lot of people, the kind of concept of telemarketing in their mind is, here's a script, your one-page script. Here's a lump of data that I fished out of goodness knows where, go. And that is the polar opposite of how telemarketing should be. So when you look at your data, you're looking at elements such as obviously those that you know, the ones that you know work for you, but it's actually understanding things like geographics. Are you best off focused on the city or actually rurally have people gone into there? The size of those companies, is there, I hate the term sweet spot, so excuse me using that term, but is there that sweet spot in between the right employee size? What about their turnover, net worth? Looking at all these, and obviously their industry and sectors, but understanding those are a really key factor before even thinking about phoning them. And the second part, which I was mentioning, is, we use training guides. So I'm a massive geek. I've now admitted that live on here. But the whole concept of picking up a phone is you need to have confidence and competence. So understanding that client is really vital. So whether you do it yourself or whether you're going to be doing work for other people, to actually understand the brief and the aim is vital. But the center point is actually around that client. What are their USPs? How do you kind of understand their history? How did they get to being who they are? If you're talking about somewhere physical that they're going to, you're promoting somewhere, knowing that address, what's opposite it. But actually that whole process of even understanding competitors, understanding their overcoming objections, so you actually know what you're going to talk about before you even get there. And it just changes that entire dynamic of the conversation. And I can give some really key tips actually that are really beneficial is respect. The first thing, it works, respect. We like to be respected. So when you are communicating with somebody on the phone, going in and explaining who you are and where you call from, that's vital. But in actuality, saying to somebody, I'm guessing you weren't sitting there waiting for my call. I've got a couple of things that I think would benefit you, but honestly, let me call back at a time that fits in with you. 9 times out of 10, if not more, they will let you through. It's no different if somebody walks into you and you apologize to them. That's what we do. So having that level of respect in your conversation, it opens those doors. And the key factor is once they start talking, don't be the one that's talking. So open questions, who, what, why, when, where, how. And by doing that, you say very little, 10 words less, asking a question, what are you doing? Where do you go? Who do you use? Whatever it might be. And they're saying big, long sentences because they're all yes, no questions. And the great thing for the client is all of the information is extracted. You get wonderful bits of information back you wouldn't have known anywhere else. And from their perspective, the person on the phone, they feel in control. And you can glide them all the way through. You can apply all the features of that client, all the USPs that make them stand out, those features, those benefits. And you end up building a rapport with that. So you end up with very few who are disinterested. The ones who would have usually rejected you have respected you. And you end up with a much better pipeline of leads, much faster conversions.
Okay. So, I think you summarized so many important points very succinctly there, Felicity. I think one of the first things that you mentioned was the customer segmentation, really, because of course, in marketing, if you're going to be spending money, for example, on an advertising campaign, you're not going to be just scattergunning to everybody. So really the same fundamental principles apply. And I think that's what you were saying to a telemarketing campaign, that you've got to know your audience and you've got to know that they have an interest in what you do or that they are qualified, really.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I think where the whole direct marketing or telemarketing industry has got a bad name is when people, they just call anybody.
I do. And there's no purpose to that phone call. You need to really think about who you're communicating with. And particularly as well, going back to the training guide style way that we work, is actually thinking about the needs within those industries. So if you can then segment those industries, their pain points are all going to be different. And then you can also segment that by size and even geographically as well. Somebody in the city versus somebody rurally, their needs are different. And if you start thinking about that before you even phone, you entirely change the way that you communicate with the person on the phone. So that respect element even heightens again. And again, you're building up relationships. So telemarketing is this concept that people think is hard sales and pushing you in a corner. But actually, it's not. It's just another form of communication. And it's that relationship building where you want somebody to, I suppose the term know, like, trust is very well known in our market. But it's a know, like, trust. And if you have somebody who's really respectful and really caring towards your company and your situation, you're going to end up with them actually having a much better relationship. And one of the other key elements as well, it's about being human. I didn't even enter into the human realm of this, but if you act so corporate-y on the phone or like somebody standing behind you with a whip, you lose all of your you. And we know people buy from people. So one of the key things in the land of telemarketing is actually understanding how to perceive somebody on the phone. I mean, visually, and so the phone, you have 3 to 18 seconds to kind of be judged and judge. And I think that our job's even harder because you can't see them. So there's no body language. You have to pick up on the phone. So by being able to apply that sort of what kind of nature are they? How are they going to communicate? What kind of industry are they? And you can mix it all together. You can actually create a really kind of, I was going to say, wholesome kind of communication, no matter whether they are sole trader or the CEO of a massive FTSE. You've got that ability to have a conversation with somebody where you're a human and they appreciate that tone of voice on the phone.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I love telephone conversations. And I think when the pandemic hit and everybody started using Zoom, I struggle with it to begin with because it's so kind of sensory rich, I suppose, is the way of kind of describing it. Because we're not only trying to process verbal information, we're also trying to process visual information. And of course, we are not able to look at people in the way that we would if we were having a real life conversation with them.
Mm.
I mean, right now, for example, I'm not looking at your face because that would make me look sideways. I'm looking up at my webcam, because that's obviously what the audience see. So I'm listening to you, but I'm looking up. And I think it's very interesting when you kind of blend all of those things. And I think what happens is you dilute the impact of the pure spoken word. And that is why I love phone calls. And I bought, some really high ticket programs just on a phone call, because I think you're only really using one channel, really, aren't you?
Very much so.
Of
And if they relate to you as well, if they make
Yeah.
the points of that conversation relative to your needs, your industry, you feel like you're listened to and cared for, that's really crucial. But I think that's it doesn't matter what business you're in, what industry, and whether you're product or a service led, it doesn't matter. It's about that skill set of just being able to kind of, I suppose, almost put the ball in their court. You're in control of it. We're not allowed to use the term manipulation in telemarketing, obviously. But yeah, the process is you make them feel in control, but in actuality, you're guiding. And by guiding, you've got the sort of process planning, if you like, of where that call is going to go. You know how to apply your, whether it's your own or somebody else's, how to apply those features and benefits. You've just got to be confident on making sure that you're applying them to the right person, the right industry, and so it's relative. You can't throw everything at everyone and hope that they respond to something. It's just got to have a balance to it.
Yeah, and I think that's it, really. I mean, it's got to have a balance, but also, it's like any sales conversation, isn't it? It's just, I suppose with telemarketing, you really are starting from cold-ish a lot of the time, because
A lot of the time.
yeah. So when I say cold-ish and you say a lot of the time, I mean, obviously, just to go back to what we were saying at the beginning, the idea is that it's not like a cold audience of randomers, but
No.
it's a cold
Reply.
audience. Yeah.
I mean, one of the key things that I think people forget within their businesses, though, is actually the quality of the data that they have on their own hands. And people who've had previous customers, current customers, the lack of consistency with them. Let's say it was, I don't know, a signage company, and they were having, they'd have thousands, actually worked with them, they had thousands and thousands of accounts of data, but they weren't following it up. And over the years, there were about 32,000 counts worth of data. So going back, there were, customers, big, small projects and all sorts. But going back over that database for them, it opened up a huge amount of opportunities. The data was therefore cleaned. You knew who the new decision makers were. You knew what their upcoming plans were. Now make that into something that happens, say, quarterly within your business. The difference of that repeat custom, those recommendations, if it's your current and active clients, understanding how they're feeling, that is the thing that will trigger them to start recommending and referring you. So I think there's a big gap there. And I also think that there's sort of a gap in the market of, I'm going to use marketing as one of them. The relationship between marketing should not be as segmented as it is. The whole process of marketing is that we complement each other. And what you tend to find in a lot of marketing is they'll go, oh, well, I do some telemarketing. Oh, well, I'm doing some social media. Oh, well, I do some email marketing. But you merge those together and you've now opened up 3 massive industries to work in together. So you've got somebody maybe sending out your emails, but the telemarketer goes and follows it up and cleans those, understands what the interests are. You're doing ads on social media, get telemarketing to go and follow up the ad clicks because they might not need you now, but the interest is there. And it's about that relationship of actually then using the telemarketing knowledge to feed that back into the social media. Are there keywords, there particular things they've liked and disliked? Have you got things in opportunities of new LinkedIn connections and all sorts? So it's about the complementary elements of how, or ducks, depending on what I class myself as. Sometimes I'm an element, sometimes I'm a duck. But, it's putting them together and getting them to work together creates far better opportunities for businesses. It's about making sure your marketing actually is complementing each other and feeding that information back between each other in some sort of wonderful marketing loop.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you've got a business, so you do this for businesses. As you said, they've maybe got a lot of neglected leads in the form of, previous customers or, perhaps people that have responded to some form of marketing outreach campaign. right? Understand that. But, for people who are just, let's just say, solopreneurs or experts or whatever,
Yeah.
I mean, telemarketing has a place for them as well, doesn't it?
Very much. And I think that it doesn't matter what stage you're at in business. It doesn't matter whether you are a new startup, whether you are been, I don't know, you've been going for years, whether you're a company that once somebody's worked with you, they have left and they go off, and it's all about consistent new leads. It's about how you approach those people and what you know about them before you touch the phone. So I think that, if you're looking at this in the sense of tips and techniques for the individual, for them to take away, the best thing to do is not touch the phone and think about the whys. If you're not outsourcing it or you're doing it in-house, you need to actually really consider, that data that you're contacting, or if you are using email marketing, well, can I follow this up? Or if I'm using ads, what can I follow up in here? Ways to make that even a bit more of a comfortable process if you're not naturally on phone. But actually pre-planning what you're going to say to somebody, not to the extent that you have a script, but to the extent that you understand that company in a whole.
Yeah.
But particularly if you work in it, so if you're a solopreneur, you've got the ability to look at it from their perspective, not yours. And you have to kind of take away, it's not about me. I know this business inside out. You have to be able to look at it from what their needs are. And it's all about what's in it for me. And I will say, for anyone doing their own telemarketing or planning to do their own telemarketing, understand that if somebody says no, don't take it to heart. We usually do about 13 calls an hour, which around 3 are effective to a decision maker. So in 8 hours, you're looking at around 100 phone calls, somewhere around, 20 to 30 decision makers within 8 hours. Half of those will say no. And they will be all different reasons, from my brother-in-law does that for me, to we're going into administration, to no, I'll never touch you, you get away with my phone. Very few of those, in fairness, but there's lots of reasons. So out of those 30, about 15 of those are not going to have any interest. You have to have a bit of a thicker skin on the phone to remember they don't know you, the person. They're in that stage. Some people will be dismissive or have things going on, but the ones that do open up and do start talking to you, they're the thing to get excited about. So don't fixate on the negative, fixate on the positive. And then it's all about that. I'm going down the geeky route again, sorry. But when you look at your data, it's about starting to read your data. So seeing where the data reads in terms of, why are these people saying no? What geographic are they in? Where are they saying yes? And if you start to read those, it actually helps you refine that data even more. So as you then progress to whether you carry on with your telemarketing or you start feeding that into other forms of marketing, you can actually start to really refine your database of leads. You'll learn very quickly what works and what doesn't work. Sorry, you can tell I like my job, can't you?
Oh, definitely. And, the thing is, I've done a lot of sales in my time. I have great respect for sales. And so everything that you're talking about completely resonates with me. And I just think it's so important, isn't it, to really let the customer, be the star. Yeah, really, that's what it's all about, isn't it? They have to be allowed to shine. You have to make, as long as you make them feel worthwhile, important, interesting, and so on, then you've done your job, haven't you? And you can't really expect any more than that, can you?
No, you can't. I think one of the key things, though, that people maybe have a slightly wrong perception on with telemarketing, and I've had to deal with it in clients over the years, they have this expectation that every call's answered and every answer's a yes. And we know that's not the case. And I think actually, if you get to understand the fact that it's a relationship build, these leads and opportunities, they do come. But like with everything out there, it's a process, and it could take half a dozen phone calls of building up rapport for that person to make themselves into this absolutely boiling hot lead who can't wait to see, speak and meet with you. But if you put them off on that first phone call by going at them, in the wrong way, you've lost them entirely. You've lost the respect of your business.
Totally.
So I think that it's actually that expectation, whether you are the one making the phone calls or you have a team who are doing it for you, or you make it an external service. It's having that understanding that whatever is going on, it is something that takes time. I think people are really hard on themselves with telemarketing. I've had clients go, I made 6 phone calls and it doesn't work. And I'm kind of going, yeah, you need to put a few more onto those, my dear, to see what's working and what doesn't. Yeah, that relationship of actually I'm making you aware of my business. I think it's something that will benefit yours. And that you're trying to be a benefit to a company rather than selling at them. You change your mindset with that. Actually, the leads and opportunities come in thick and fast. But it's about building the rapport with them before you get to the lead.
Yeah, so much wisdom, there. And it just totally makes sense to me, Felicity, because as I said, having been in sales for a long time, one of the things that I noticed when I was working in my media businesses and career is that sometimes people would have reached a level where they were just ready to hear what you had to say. And then they would convert very fast. And you'd be like, where did they come from? It was just like that. And other times people can be listening to you, or they can be receiving your message for quite a long time before they finally take action. And I often think about that in the context of my own clients, because obviously they are all selling their services. And I say to them, look, these conversations that you might have with people today, you might think, oh, that was rubbish. That, they're never going to be a client of mine or whatever. But they may come back, mightn't they, further down the line? And
very much. And it's that consistency as well with communicating with somebody.
Yeah.
You've got to keep consistently with it. I always say to clients, do less hours per week, but do them over a longer period of time. Yeah. So rather than trying to cram everything in one, which I have more fingers and toes, and I've been asked this, it's one of those things where I go, oh, well, just do it all in one go. And I want, oh, who's following it up at the end?
Yeah.
So who's the one building the relationships with people? They're not going to necessarily all be ready now. They might be ready in 3, 6, 9 months. And if you have a pipeline of your year ahead, knowing when people's contracts come to an end, knowing when they're reviewing their plans or looking at a new supplier or whatever it might be, I think the key thing when it comes to marketing, any form of it, it's about consistency. And if you are consistently keeping up with your marketing, and even better, if you get those elements of marketing to start working together, you will see far bigger and better outcomes. So one of my favorite things that I try to do with our clients, get us to marry up with what they're also using. Have they got other suppliers that are outside? Have they got them internally? Let us work together, because we can make a great team. But the whole concept is I'd rather do less and do it frequently than do more and then it fizzle. So I think that's always the wise move I put in with my clients. So they can always increase their hours, but I'd rather that they did it over a steady period, and therefore they felt more in control, but also they weren't sitting there biting their nails, wondering why everyone wasn't saying yes. If they can see it steadily, they get more enthusiastic to kind of understand that pattern, and then they kind of see oh, look, it takes, 6 weeks to get a conversion. Okay, now we've got a consistent level of conversions. If we up our hours, that's going to speed up that process. So sometimes, it does take a while to kind of get into a comfortable place with your marketing, I suppose, is the way I was going with that one.
Yeah. And, that really is a very important point, is that thing about consistency. Because when we think about it in life, if we get to know somebody, just a friend, let's say making a new friend or something. I walk the dog, and if I meet somebody, I might have a polite conversation with them, just passing the time of day or something about the weather or something like that. You might meet them a week later or something with the same dog, and then we'll get into more of a chat about how long have you been living in the area, and all of that, and have you got a family, and all of that kind of thing. And gradually you might say, oh, well, you're going to be walking next week in the afternoon. And, you just evolve relationships in that way. And that's
no different on the phone. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. And that's it. There's no magic or mystery really to this, is it? When you think about it, it is just building relationships, isn't it? A relationship of trust.
And that's what any business owner should want with their clients.
Yeah.
So if you think of somebody who comes to you as your client, who you work with, you respect them. Most of us bend over backwards for our clients and do far more than we're probably being paid to. But that's what we do. And we know about them. We know those little intricate details, probably their personal lives, all of their business. We get to know them. So why would you view your prospective leads any differently? Why would you want to approach them any differently? You wouldn't want them to talk about you as this awful hard sales company. You'd want to talk to them about, have them talk about you going, do you know what, this company rang the other day and they sound really interesting. They're able to do this and this. Should we get them in to have it? That's what it should be about. Yeah. And I think that when we look at our own clients, you've got to view the treatment of your prospective leads in the same way.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So a lot of this is also about training your team, isn't it? And I know that's something that you're very hot on, aren't you, Felicity?
Yeah, very much. I think that, it's not the sort of 80s used car salesman kind of attitude. So when I said at the start about having, your one-page script thrown in front of you, it doesn't give you the information that you need. So to me, actually, I write training guides. So mine are roughly sort of 15, 20 pages. I told you I was geeky, right? So yeah, so the sort of process of writing that is, it's actually really breaking down that company. It's taking it apart and putting it back together in both a sales and a marketing mind. So the brief and the aim, obviously, is that reasoning of being on the phone and the whys I'm being on the phone. But it's that relationship to each of those industries and the size of companies and everything else. So you've got those sort of USPs, you know what the outcome is going to be. The center point is really where you need to understand your business. So if you're doing this yourself, or you have an internal team, or if you're externally doing it, making sure that they understand you is really crucial. So the process of mine is the about you. It's understand the history. Why did that company come to where they are? Because if I rang you up and was having a chat with you, you'd want me to be confident enough that you could chuck anything at me and I could answer it. You don't want it to be a sales call. You want it to be a communication tool. So understanding that, but then understanding those amazing sort of features and benefits of the client. Is it service? Is it product led? Where does that fit in with those industries? Understand the data and being able to break that down relative to all those USPs. And I mentioned earlier, it's understanding even your competitors, not to disregard them. You don't go, oh God, you don't want to work with them. It's actually being able to, oh yeah, we know ABC company. They're actually, we're really well respected by us. We've been working along with a few of their clients supplying so-and-so. So we know that's one of the things they don't do. Is that anything that you've looked at before? It's being able to kind of work in unison with others, or get that understanding that if somebody said a name of a brand that you're, maybe not so sure of, you'd know it as the telemarketer. Say, oh yes, but you've got that reference point for the client to know who they're working with. Yeah. And one of the big ones is knowing you're overcoming objections. So understand from that client, maybe experiences they've had, but noting them as you call, what kind of were the plans that, I say rejections, the objections that you faced. If you've pre-planned those, you end up overcoming those objections without even thinking about it in the call. So training your telemarketer to do that, but also the knowledge factor that we don't know everything, and they will also be fed in and you get to learn about that. So that sort of training guide process is actually something that's consistently ongoing. And it's something that, the client should be able to use within their own team, new staff members coming in, if they move their marketing internally. It's something that they should be able to take with them and keep adding into, and I suppose expanding as they grow.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, while you were speaking, I was thinking about the instant authority killer, which is when you are an interested customer on the phone to, let's just say a telemarketer, a representative of the business, and you ask them a question and they say, oh, I don't know about that. I'll find out about that and I'll get back to you. And that is not really what you want to hear, is it?
No. And I think, there are ways around of getting it. I mean, I always kind of think, we're almost like the outside of the box clients, the inside of the box, they've got all that knowledge bank. So the more knowledge that you have beforehand, the more kind of, ways of being able to understand what could and couldn't happen, it makes that call a lot easier. But there's even simplistic techniques that, let's say somebody's asking questions, they're not ready to meet, they don't want an appointment, they don't even want a telephone appointment, but they're asking all these questions. You can just simply say something as simplistic as, do you know what? You've got some phenomenal questions there, and I don't want to give you, not spot on answers. I'm going to get Steve to give you a call if that's okay. At a later point. Yeah. And then you can go in that way. Or if they're asking loads of questions, let's say it ends with them wanting information. Best thing to do is go back to the client, or, whoever's higher above, and then say, look, I've got this and this going on. Do you think that you'd give them that? I've sent them the information, but they're asking this and this. You can go into so much more detail. I think we'll get them. So it's that balance of actually being part of that company. One of our things is that we're part of the companies we call for. So it's that comfort factor of going to whomever whether we're working with the sales director, marketing director, or MD directly. It's about being able to work along with them and say, there's an opportunity here, but would you like to get involved at this point? Some of our clients take in as soon as we've spoken with a decision maker because they have an internal team or they want that responsibility and they just want us to focus on the cold, to build it up to a person. Some of them want us to not talk to them until they've got an appointment. Everybody's different with how they view it. But I suppose to me, it's the logical thing of what's going to be the best outcome.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Felicity, let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell me how did you get into this? I mean, what's your kind of background and your history?
Okay, so telemarketing was my first ever job.
Okay.
When I was 16.
Okay.
I pretty much have stayed in it. I mean, I've had a couple of experiences where I was a dental nurse at a very young age, But even
Okay.
that had me on reception. I was still on the phone. I was selling items behind the counter. I was rebooking in. I was getting people to book in for different styles of appointments, like, I don't know, teeth polishing and all sorts. So I had a level of customer care that went on with my job role. And I went through several different experiences of being on the phone and face to face and building up rapport, and it balanced the marketing and sales. And I worked, going back there a few years ago, for a really amazing telemarketing company. They were brilliant and they really taught me a lot. And I think I was the last in, but I was also the last to be let go when they shut down the company that I worked for due to the recession back in 2007. So they dwindled down, and I saw an opportunity to go off and start a telemarketing company. I had this big thing because I back at that point, they worked with really massive companies with really big budgets. But I saw these smaller companies and I kind of went, what if telemarketing was flexible? So there wasn't a minimum budget. What if there was the opportunity to be able to be flexible with it? So I was about 25 and thought, I know, I'll go and set up a company. So I walked into the town, took out an office, and 13 and a half years here I sit. So my sort of 22 and a half years of existence has been around, or last 22 years, has been around telemarketing, been around sales, been around marketing. And I have such a passion for it, but it's about the passion of making it human and respect-led, and actually getting people to kind of view it with a bit of different respect. I mean, the amount of clients I've come across who I know that we're non-compatible just because their expectation is every call's answered, everyone's a yes, push them into a corner. That isn't how it works. So I've spent the last 13 and a half years in my own environment of working with, I haven't niched in terms of an industry, because actually that variation of industries and size of companies, we work with sole traders, our biggest clients in the FTSE 250. We do everything from working with the MD to build up their leads and opportunities, all the way up to managing a team of 64 reps. And I think that being able to have the flexibility of not only how we work with them, but also what we can generate from that. I mean, it's even people who go to expos, that pre-marketing that you do, the post-marketing you do is the thing that makes the money back from an expo. People don't remember to put that into action. They forget their leads, as we were saying earlier, their active clients or their ex-clients. It's all of those kind of elements. They're really crucial. So they're kind of things that I focus on. So the sort of history of me has been around telemarketing. And I do have another business that's coming up to its 13th year, which is a networking business, because I obviously thought there was nothing better to do with my time. Yeah, so the other element of my sort of passion has been around business networking and increasing the ROI back from networking. So I've been putting together, I suppose it's formulas and algorithms to increase the ROI from networking. And I'm just in the process of nationalizing my group at the moment. So it keeps me out of trouble, I suppose. Hopefully I work a lot, but yes, it's just things that I think need to be changed in the market. So telemarketing was one of my big ones. And I've happily, we've got something like 36 awards now for the way that we work, and the fact that it is this sort of non-script led human communication, respect-led communication. We've won quite a few awards for that. And in the networking side, I just think that there's a missing gap on the market maybe for how networking works. Also, I'm terribly rebellious. So if you tell me to do something, I tend to do the opposite. So I ended up doing it accidentally with networking, where I tried to make networking different the way it was a few years ago. But it's been the last 3 years, particularly for both businesses, have been absolutely fascinating. And the way that, I'm assuming you had the same thing working in marketing, the way that businesses have changed, the way they perceive marketing. Obviously, everyone got their bounce back loans and we had a very busy period in the land of marketing. But I also think that the way people are perceiving it now, the respect towards its consistency, the respect towards having it as something that they actually plan. I think strategy is becoming something that's far more sort of influential. I think brand is so more influential. People are understanding the value of it. One of the things I missed talking about was actually taking on, when you're calling on behalf of somebody, it's not just the business you're taking on the personality of, but also think of the person who's going on the appointment. And you've almost got to kind of conduct yourself in the way of they are, so that communication is consistent. And I think that when you look at brand and bring that into telemarketing or any form of marketing, there's a level of consistency that goes along with it. You've got to talk in the same way the company has. There's no point going in talking like you're off Twitter, if they're very corporatized. So you've got to kind of make sure that you're representing a company well. So I suppose it's gone off on many a tangent there, but yeah, the whole concept to me has just been career history led, about maybe changing perceptions on certain topics. So telemarketing, networking have been my passions in life.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think you made a really important point there. That's a dog in the background.
Oh, well, I like having him here.
Yeah, he's like,
We need to put a name on
I,
it.
I want to be a star too, Yeah. So the thing that you mentioned about brand and, brand marketing, which is obviously very important, and
Yeah.
having that, that message communicated in a consistent way across multiple platforms and obviously multiple forms of communication to the client is just, that's what it's all about, really. Because, of course, as we all know, brand is to do with the perception that you form in your ideal client's mind. If you're talking about one thing over there in a certain way and something else over here in a different way, then all it's going to do is just weaken your brand as a whole. So I think your point there was very relevant
Very
and very
much so.
important.
And you wouldn't want to be doing all that hard work. You look at brand strategy, doing all that hard work to create consistency in the flow across social media, email, website, any form of content, blogs. That all has a level of consistency to it. So you can't jump on a phone and be a totally different person to what you're representing elsewhere. You have to have a level of consistency. This goes back to what I was saying about combining your suppliers. If they're external suppliers or internal suppliers, you have to make sure that they're working together. Because if they're all doing their own thing and not knowing what the other ones are doing, you just have a lot of messy marketing. But if you combine it together and make it consistent, and anything in terms of strategy, in all honesty, has an override. But yeah, you have that over the top, and then you kind of form a sort of process underneath. You align it to work inside. Oh, you're doing that email, right? We'll follow up the week later. Right, those ads are going up. Right, we'll get onto it then. This is coming back to you. We'll go and make sure that you've got that consistency, but it's all got to sing the same tune. So it's really vital.
Well, I mean, what can I say, Felicity? I'm a convert. Where do I sign up? No, I mean, look, if before this evening or whenever you're listening to the podcast, if you had a poor opinion of telemarketing and you thought, well, it's just cold calling to people who have no interest in what you do, I'm sure that this episode will have changed, your mind. Because Felicity, you have definitely opened my eyes. I mean, I'm very much a sort of sales and marketing enthusiast, as many of my audience know, but it has just been an absolutely fantastic conversation and really interesting to hear about your approach. So what I wanted to ask you before we go is, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to talk about a telemarketing strategy for their own business?
Of course. So obviously I'm more than open to help, give ideas. We're all in the same economy. So my viewpoint is ask away. Let's see, it might not even be me. I might be able to guide you in the direction of other elements that can help you. So if they want to contact me, best one is probably email, which is felicity.francis@talkresults.co.uk. Of course, you can go onto the website, which is talkresults.co.uk, or they can contact me via phone, which I'm more than welcome to give out. If you want me to give my phone number out on this podcast, which is 07850 017 624. That's 07850 017 624. I'm more than happy to be of any assistance if somebody has any questions about it, wants perception of what to do with their data or who they should be targeting. That's my job and my passion, as you possibly worked out from this evening. But yes, I'm very passionate about it. But I do like the concept of getting people changing the way that they're either using telemarketing at the moment or their perception of it, because it's the most phenomenal tool. It's the only form of direct marketing out there. That kind of feedback and essential insight you get from your potential clients out there is just eye-opening, and it opens so many more doors.
Definitely. Well, thank you again, Felicity, for joining us. It's been so great to have you here on the Smart Connector podcast, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you.
Jane Bayler is the Smart Connector, a London-based, passionate serial entrepreneur, brand marketer and business growth exploder who helps overlooked and undervalued consultants and sector experts generate consistent, scalable revenues through becoming the go-to choice of their dream clients. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate you liking, rating, and reviewing the podcast on the platform you've heard it on. And check out the links in the show notes if you'd like to connect with Jane or any of her guests in person. Thank you for listening and come back soon.